So, welcome everyone. I'm Sharon Gaynor, Training Research and Development Assistant with Haven Horizons and Knowledge Broker on the Virtual Community of Practice. Today we are delighted to welcome Noelle Collins, Senior Manager of Belfast and Lisburn Women's Aid, to discuss her work. But before I hand you over to Noelle, a big welcome to community members. As always, here's a weekly review of topics of interest on the platform. We're currently making a few changes which we hope will improve the overall user experience, which I'll quickly demonstrate on the next slide. And we'll be updating our platform user guides to reflect these changes and posting it to the announcement session when it's complete. Danielle Roberts from Reclaim the Agenda, who presented last week's Lunch and Learn, has also come back with a few responses and shared additional resources. So I'll show you where they're located as well. So from this slide, you'll see we've moved the DSGBA events into announcements. And that's in the general section. You can see it here. This is the view from your smartphone, and I've also uploaded there the view. You'll see it there if you're using a laptop. So it's in announcements and you'll see the events heading. So everything is just moved across to that. We're also going to be streamlining the discussion forums as well. And Katerina has uploaded a recording there from Danielle from last week. And you'll see it again. It's under the Lunch and Learn. Again, it's in the general heading under Lunch and Learn. And Danielle has kindly responded to a lot of the questions that we didn't get to cover last week. So if you click, you'll see here on the chat box, you can follow the conversation there. And if you want to add to the conversation or join in, you can click here, or you can just click on reply. So, Noelle Collins, one of Haven Horizons' 5 books that could save your life shared island partners, is the Senior Manager of Belfast and Lisburn Women's Aid, in charge of a large refuge in South Belfast. She's responsible for the support of all potential adult female victims of human trafficking in Northern Ireland through a contract with the Department of Justice. She sits on the government's engagement group. Her involvement in the Department of Justice Reference Group has contributed to new legislation on stalking. Noelle is a board member of several community organisations, including the Council for the Homeless Northern Ireland. She's also a member of the Strategic Advisory Group of the Belfast Domestic and Sexual Violence Partnership and chairs a subgroup on prevention and support. She has led many initiatives on awareness raising and training, including bringing the Vital Voices Institute to Belfast. So over to you, Noelle.
Thank you so much. I'm exhausted just listening to that. Thank you all, and thank you for the invite. I suppose what I wanted to do today was to give you an overview of the general work of Women's Aid here in Northern Ireland. Many of you will recognise the work here because it's very similar to your own, but it's just because we have sometimes different legislation, different services, I thought it might be useful to highlight what we're doing here. So the scale of the issue here in Northern Ireland is grave, it really is, you know, so you've heard this before, I'm sure, that 1 in 4 women experience domestic or sexual abuse in some point in their life. You know, and I usually, if we were all together in a room of 100 women and asked them who has experienced domestic violence or who knows someone who has experienced domestic violence, everyone would raise their hand. And I believe this is the real epidemic that we're, you know, experiencing here, certainly here in Northern Ireland. PSNI record an incident of domestic abuse every 16 minutes. So even through this lunchtime seminar, someone will have phoned the police and police will have attended an incident. 25 women have been murdered here in Northern Ireland since 2020. And while those 25 women are the 25 women that have made the headlines, and we know that it is dreadful and we have photographs of them all and we grieve for them, there are also hundreds, if not thousands, of women who have been seriously injured and left with disability for the rest of their life, and that could be a physical or a mental health disability because of the abuse within an intimate partner relationship. And just, sorry, I have a presentation here that I didn't send, and now it's not going to work for me, but Okay. So in Belfast, Lisburn Women's Aid, we had 918 women stayed in our 3 refuges here last year. 542 children. And it's funny how that has changed dramatically, because at one stage children would have been the highest population of people would have been children, but now families are so much smaller. Or because of domestic violence, we work with a lot of women who don't have their children with them because they have been removed. We had 7 babies born in refuge last year, 2 of them literally born in refuge. One on an office floor and one on a kitchen floor, God bless them. We have a massive outreach project, and last year 7,543 women received support in their own homes. So that's women who have been rehoused or still living with their partners. If they're living with their partners, obviously we don't go to the home. We tend to meet them up in different offices and places throughout Belfast and Lisburn. 274 women who were pregnant received support from Women's Aid. 5,900 children had mums who were supported. So 1/5 of all crime is a domestic violence incident. Now, so I suppose what we get our referrals from the PSNI, social services, solicitors, medical people, health. We have MARIC here. I don't think you have MARIC in the south.
No.
So MARIC is a multi-agency risk assessment that is chaired by the police. In saying that, it's going through a consultation at the moment, and I sit on the advisory group. And I think the police are trying to get rid of it and want health to take it on. We feel we've fought so long for domestic violence to be recognised as a crime. It should sit with police and they should continue to chair it. So we'll see what happens with that. We in Northern Ireland Women's Aid is the only sort of hostel refuge support that women can actually self-refer. Any other form of temporary accommodation, they have to go through an agency such as the Housing Executive. So what causes domestic violence and abuse? And I suppose the myths around it is, unemployment, finance, drink, mental ill health. But in actual fact, we believe it is about power and control, dominance and ownership. In Northern Ireland, again, we have 2 definitions. We have a wider government definition of domestic violence. It takes in threatening, controlling, coercive behaviour, violence or abuse, goes on, but it does include, it includes by a current or former intimate partner or a family member. Where we in Women's Aid believe that we work only with intimate partner relationships, and believe that domestic violence is the intentional, persistent, physical, emotional or sexual abuse of a woman and her children in a way that causes pain, distress or injury and can lead to loss of life. We have, again, a definition of coercive control. Coercive control has become very popular. It was the in word there for everything. And legislation came in, which is great because we have women. I spoke to a woman last week who has been in prison for 10 years and is now put in an appeal and using the coercive control issue, as happened in England and Wales over the last few years. So an intentional pattern of behaviour, often used alongside other forms of abuse. We would see coercive control as the umbrella of abuse. It can include threats, excessive regulation, intimidation, humiliation, and enforced isolation. It's designed to punish, dominate, exploit, exhaust, create fear, confusion, and increase dependency in a woman or a woman and her children. And someone actually said to me, coercive control is in my head. I coercively control myself now because it's in here now and the pattern is there and it's become part of my life. The types of abuse, which would be obvious, emotional abuse, which again, there can't be physical abuse or any other sexual abuse without emotional abuse, financial abuse, abuse as a parent, we hear that a lot. Spiritual abuse, as we become more diverse in Northern Ireland, we are hearing a lot more of spiritual abuse from different cultures. And of course, technical abuse or tech abuse, which again is particularly with young people, it's more and more being used as another form, like, of abuse. Women come in and there are things that are posted on their Facebook accounts and that, all derogatory things, photographs, etc. And the impact, physical, obviously, is the death of a woman, as well as all those other physical injuries. Sexual abuse, internal injuries, STIs, unplanned pregnancy, financial abuse, particularly now as we're going through this cost of living crisis. Women are saying, I actually can't afford to leave. And I was at a meeting in West Belfast where the police attended a partnership meeting, and the senior police officer told us that she had actually said to the woman, now think about this before you leave. Think about what you're doing, because think of the impact on your children. You won't have a house. You won't be able to afford X, Y, and Z. So really, you need to think about it. My God, But for some women that's true, and it could be even a woman mentioned that she didn't want to leave because her children were in, after school clubs that cost money, and she couldn't afford to pay that if she was on her own. So financial abuse is a big thing for women, and reasons why they can't move on. There's obviously a cycle of violence, the Leonore Walker cycle, where there is an explosion and there's a row, and then you go into a honeymoon period. And women would say in that honeymoon period, it's almost like the power and control shifted for a short time, because he's so frightened that she's going to leave, that the woman then feels like she's in control. But it doesn't last long, but it is a hook of hope. And then, you're walking on eggshells because the mood changes. Then some women actually provoke a row to get back into the honeymoon period again, because it's much better. Unfortunately, what happens is the honeymoon period gets shorter and shorter. So I suppose what we talk to people about is how they respond to domestic violence. If you know someone, how you recognise it, respond it, refer and record it. And it's understanding the reasons why. One of the most popular questions, and I'm sure other people have been asked this as well, it's why does she not leave? Why did she not protect her children? And it's amazing how, as a society, we focus on the victim, and it's almost a blame thing. We're not asking questions like, why did he not protect the children? Why did he not? What was his input into this relationship? Why was he not a good father? So we have to change that mindset. And obviously, there's violence, intimidation, or barriers for leaving, threats, blackmail, lack of support, the shame, not being believed, not being able to cope, fear of losing their children. And again, where more diversity is coming in now, women who don't have any recourse to public funds think that they are stuck there. And immigration and visa is actually used as a threat. If you leave me, that you will, be deported to another country, and the children will stay here with me. So, that's quite real for some women. But it's recognizing, what domestic violence is and how serious it is. It's really, really important for all of us in society to know that. It's understanding those risks that women go through, particularly in separation. Separation is the point. The point of separation is the most vulnerable time for a victim of domestic violence, and research would show that many of the women, the 25 women, many of them had left their abusive relationship within weeks, and then were murdered or were trying to escape it. Pregnancy. Pre-birth and under 30% of domestic violence starts at this time and escalates in pregnancy. And this is because research would say that the perpetrator is having to share the woman with someone, even if it is his own child, that her love is going to somewhere else, not totally his, and her time, her thoughts, everything is now focused on a baby, and men can actually be jealous of that. Escalation in violence, previous domestic violence, is the most effective indicator that further domestic violence will occur. And 33% will have a second incident within 5 weeks of the first. And this would be Jane Mountain Smith's take on it. The escalation of violence is really, really. And if any of you have read her book, In Control, and she talks about the timeline of domestic violence, and it's a really good risk assessor for anyone working in this field to actually say where women are. We in Northern Ireland have domestic homicide reviews over the last 2.5 years, and the timeline is used to show that woman's life when the peak times of when she was most at risk. So, I mean, I suggest anyone to read the book, and there will be an understanding of how quickly this can happen, how dangerous it is. And all of the women who have died here, you can actually fit into that timeline. So a great tool to use. Stalking, we have now stalking legislation in Northern Ireland, and 71% of domestic violence homicides had a high stalking element in them. And I think for us, even to get our courts and police to recognise that stalking is such an issue, it's so important that, I mean, that was major education and training that went into the justice system, including PSNI. We had women who would phone the police and say, look, this guy is coming up and leaving chocolates at my door and flowers, and I really don't want him to do that. And police would respond by, I wish someone would leave flowers and chocolates for me, you know. And women are really, really petrified. So it's great that we have that stalking legislation, and there have been many convictions. I don't have the stats, but I did talk to the public prosecutors who are saying that it comes into nearly every case now. Strangulation and choking is a common method of killing in domestic homicides by male perpetrators on female victims. Now, I will hold my hand up and say I was guilty, as were many people within our organisation, that when a woman came in and said, you know, he choked me, we didn't have legislation until recently around non-fatal strangulation. But you would have looked at the woman's neck, and if there wasn't any marks there, you would say, oh, she's all right, you know. We are now educated in it a bit more, and we realise the signs of strangulation. But we also realise how many women risk assess themselves around strangulation. And women would tell us, he only strangled me a wee bit this time, or he only choked me a wee bit this time. And they risk assess that, so perhaps they didn't pass out, or they didn't lose consciousness, and they didn't maybe wet themselves, you know. Can you imagine the control a perpetrator has over a woman? It can take 6 seconds to actually strangle someone, and the strength of opening a can of Coke is all that's needed. But to stop at a period of time before that woman passes out or before she loses her life, that control, and having that control, is vast. And it's really interesting. There's a lot of work being done on non-fatal strangulation, particularly in St Mary's University in London, and we would have people come over quite a lot to do sessions. But in America, when police are called out to a domestic violence incident, they go into the house, and the first thing they do, they go into the bedroom and flip the mattress to see if the woman has wet herself, because strangulation there is so great. And if someone could stop for a speeding ticket, you know, and they're looking at the record. If there has been strangulation in the past, and I mean non-fatal strangulation, that will come up in his record. Long, even before a drug thing will come up, or stealing a car will come up, or a burglary come up, strangulation is the top crime that will be flagged. So I mean, I'm sure I'm talking to the converted here, but I suppose, if someone does disclose domestic violence and abuse to you, it's how we respond, and how we listen and believe and don't be judgmental, and validate the decision to disclose. So if someone is, disclosing, you don't say things like, and I have heard it said, that's not too bad, or I know that happened to my friend, or that happened to me. You really don't do that. You really need to listen and give that person space, and actually believe them, and say things like, how are things at home? Is there anything else happening that might be affecting your day-to-day life? Do you feel safe at home? Are there times when you're frightened of your partner or other family members, in a softer way? I was in one of the prisons, not literally, not as an inmate, but as a visitor. And I watched some of the guards, and they were role playing forms that they had to fill out. And they asked direct questions such as, have you been physically abused? Do you know what domestic violence is? Have you been raped? Have you been sexually abused by a family member? Oh my God, who would actually answer that? So we spent a lot of time softening up the questions and training them on how to ask things. I suppose now, and good, helpful responses would be things like, thank you for talking to me. It's not your fault. There is support available, and or even I believe you is important. I love this saying. It's like, know all the theories, master all the techniques, but as you touch a human soul, be just another human soul. Because we are all individuals, but we're all the same, So when we sit with a woman, it's important to know that she's exactly the same as me. And women need to know that. So that was Carl Jung, and I really like that. And then I have information on where we can refer. Just quickly, I will go through just some of the services that we have here in Women's Aid. We do have a web chat, telephone advice, one-to-one specialised support. We have personal development programs. We have crisis refuge accommodation, and we have 5 one-stop shops. And the one-stop shops, I have to say, are so good, and they're free, and we have them in different parts of the community. And we have solicitor, we have police, we have Women's Aid, we have housing, we have other advice centres in there. And a woman can come in at any time, and she doesn't actually have to give her name. And she can go round all of those services under the one roof. Whereas if she went to one of those agencies, so they're great things, and they're really, really used. And if you do have the resources, I would advise you to try and start one up anywhere, because they are definitely used. We have one-to-one specialist work, preventative education and workshops. So that's all the work that we do with children as well. We have a whole children's team here. We have group programs. We have different projects that I manage, which is actually the trafficking project, which is our biggest one, because there's over 300 women in that project with their children. And we help and we assist the police. So if there's going to be a raid, we get the heads up, and sometimes we go to somewhere where the police would then, if they raid a brothel, would bring the guards to, and that works really, really well. And then they pick up on our support. And we are first responders here in Northern Ireland. We're the only charity that is a first responder, which means that if a woman comes to us, she actually doesn't have to go to the police. We can fill out all the paperwork for the Home Office, which is a national referral mechanism, and we can put that through. I mean, we would always encourage women to talk to the police, because it is important. Women who have been trafficked in Northern Ireland are entitled to compensation if they have been trafficked on the island of Ireland, and that works really, really well. And we take women through that process. We have fabulous immigration solicitors, And I'm sure you don't even know that all our barristers were on strike. And the strike was over yesterday, which means that we can pick up on quite a lot of cases that have been there for 2 months. They've been on strike, so that's great. I think that's me. I feel like can I talk about our criminal justice worker just before we go? We have this post that is funded by the State Department in Washington, because I couldn't get funding here. But she takes up women she picks up on women who have been through other services but are thinking about dropping cases. Our criminal justice service is quite slow here in Northern Ireland, so it may take 2 years before a case gets to court. By that time, women are like getting on with their own lives, or they're being intimidated, or by family, by him or whatever, or their children. So this worker goes to the woman's house, picks her up literally, brings her to court, shows her what a court is like, then intensely supports her for at least 2 weeks coming up to the court case. And then on the morning of the court case, we have what we call now a REC, which is a remote evidence court. And we bring women there, the prosecutors come, take statements, and then the woman, it's a bit like special measures in the courts, although this building is not in the court. It is in a secret location, as they call it. Some distance from the court, and we had some of the Dublin judges up who are thinking of doing exactly the same thing in Dublin, which is great. So that post is just really, really good. We evaluated it, and it was said that the conviction, she worked with 85 women, and there were 68 convictions, so, and the other convictions didn't go through, were all sexual violence cases that there was no evidence to prove them through. But Jess, so sorry, that was just something I thought I would like to tell you about. I know I'm over my time, I think, but any questions?
Just a very quick reminder, we don't have a lunch and learn for the next 2 weeks over the Easter, so that's the 17th and the 24th. And the next session will be the book club on the 1st of May, and that'll be hosted by Sarah Hart. We're going to be looking at Invisible Chains by Lisa Aronson Fontes. And then just very briefly again, future lunch and learn spotlight sessions by community members. This is for May and the beginning of June. And again, if anybody would like to present a lunch and learn spotlight session, contact me there at training@havenhorizons.com. And again, just for anybody that couldn't make today, I know we had a few, the recording will be posted to the lunch and learn section of the platform, and you can feel free to comment or share your thoughts or ask any questions. And that's our social media platforms for anyone who would like to screenshot. And thank you all for attending, and thank you, Noelle, for that brilliant presentation. And we look forward to seeing everyone on the 1st of May.
Thanks so much. That was brilliant.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.